welcome to, wait, this is the end of week 7, right? So you have 1 week left. Is that right? 2 weeks left? Wait.
It looks like there's 4 more issues.
Yeah.
Indira's saying 3 weeks.
There are 3 more issues, but only have 1 week.
Only 1 week. Okay, heard.
That's all right though. Because all those issues are kind of related to each other. They're all about styling and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. So there's just 1 more week, but how are people feeling about that? Does it feel like it's gone fast? Has it been like, I mean, it's
gone so fast.
Yeah, right?
I don't know. Nothing in 2020 seems like right to me. So I'm like, did we
Yeah, I
start
know.
yesterday? Did we start this last year? I have no idea.
Exactly.
I'm like,
but yeah, it's kind of a fun part of the project where you get to focus on just like adding a lot of polish to the app. It's all sort of feature complete at this point. I'm super excited to see your demos. So you know the drill. So yeah, walk us through what you did this week. So who wants to go first?
do you want to start, Shane? Because ours is like the last kind of functionality before straight styling. Sure.
Oh, good idea. Yeah.
I can. Yeah. Do you want to share? You want me to share?
You want to show the production? I have
Sure.
the code up.
Sure. Yeah. I'll share right now. We can go through that and then go to the code. So I can share it. Okay.
And if you have the issue up, I can.
Yeah, I can grab that too. Okay, let's see. This is, sorry, y'all. Hopefully I'll know to navigate my mom's computer better soon. A friend is loaning me a computer because she got a new job and is getting a new computer in 3 weeks. So that's good. All right, so let's go. This is production. Let me find her issue. Oh, I deleted that branch. Okay. Sorry, I'm being very okay.
Yeah, I just slacked it to you as well.
Okay. All right. So our issue is issue 13. As a user, I want to view details of my purchases to better understand my purchasing patterns. The acceptance criteria was from the shopping list, user can tap to navigate to a detailed view of the item. Detailed view includes the following information: name of the item, last purchase date, estimated days, number of days until next purchase, number of times the item has been purchased. And when in item details view, a back arrow should appear in the header that takes the user back to the view list. And so we have it running right now. And this is what our view list looks like right now. And so we changed some styling as well. So it would work with the styling of like the overall app styling that like issue 14 is doing. So this is like our button. I mean, the colors are going to change, but basically we added this details button. And when you click the details button, it's going to give you the name, days since last purchased, estimated days until next purchase, and number of purchases. And then it's not quite in the header, but we have a back button that just takes you back. And we're decided to use Chakra UI as our styling library, which Rebecca had heard about on a podcast, which is aiming to be really accessible. And just kind of like in line with that. And yeah, and so if you click on the details, when you haven't purchased it yet, it's gonna just say NA, like not applicable. And then there's 0 purchases on this one because I just made that. And then you can go back. Yeah. Is there anything else you want me to add from this, Shane?
I think that was it for the demo part, but as I talk through what we changed in the code, definitely hop in if I miss some details because we.
Sure, for sure. All right, I'm gonna stop this share and let Shane share.
What's that framework called? Chakra?
Chakra. Like your
Chakra.
chakra.
Oh, Chakra. Oh, got it. Yeah, right. Okay, cool. That's a new one to me.
Yeah, it was new to all of us, so.
Okay, so as Rachel was sharing, this is kind of the production app, and this is the view list component. We were going into the details component just previously, And essentially, a majority of the functionality of this week's issue, we kind of like tackled in our initial conversations about like what we needed to do functionally. So mainly what we did was change up our router and our private routes. So in our router.js, we added in a new private route that renders the item detail component, which was a new component that we created as well. And the path essentially to this component uses similar syntax to the paths we created in previous weeks, except that we're using URL slugs instead, so that the path is a bit more dynamic based on the specific product that you're clicking on. From router, we then went into private route.js. And here what we did is kind of like change up the syntax a bit of the route to make sure that we were passing all of the props that you get when you use browser router in React. So specifically, we were trying to get like location and like params props, because those essentially let you access the URL and like take parts of the URL and like apply it to like whatever you need it for. Like you can pull that data in somewhere. So we changed up the syntax here. And then in view list, on the button that we had that says details, so if I go back, on this details button, we included a link to the path that takes in the element's ID, because we already have that, we have access to that data based on the map that we're using to like render all these things in the first place. So then when you click on details.
Yeah, the URL is actually,
Yeah, my screen's a little small so you can't see it, but what I can show you is that like, this is the local host, just because in the production app, like a lot of the component names and things change. But if you click on details here, and then you go into the match object and look at params, you'll see this ID, and this is essentially the ID that is matched to Celery, and it's on the end of the URL. So essentially it just links you to.
and that is the ID that Firebase is giving each item. So we're just like using it. So it's actually the slug, and it's like the ID for each document ID.
That's great. Does that mean that can you reload this page and it'll actually just kind of go right back to the modal? Oh, it doesn't, okay.
Yeah, that's actually curious. I'm not sure why.
Huh. Because that'd be a nice side effect of that URL structure, which I think is really smart.
Yeah, we could definitely work on that if it's not doing it.
Yeah, I guess my first thought is to save it to local storage, because I'm not sure why it wouldn't render.
Can you go back to your route?
Mm-hmm.
And I know Rebecca had asked earlier about the private route code, and that was actually, we just like copied and pasted from that article that you sent us. So that was the article Indira had initially sent about private and public routes that you had then forwarded to us. And I just took the code and put it in our code, and then it worked like that.
We're having a lot of difficulty actually trying to access like history and like the match object in the ways that we're accustomed to.
Because of the private route. Yeah, but yeah. And then have we gone to that detail? Yeah.
Yeah. So then this actual component is then using the use params kind of like method that you get from React Router DOM to pull the ID off of this match object essentially. And then we are using a .find on the user list that's passed down from context to make sure that like we're only rendering information for the one item that matches like the ID that's in the params object. This is more math. Essentially, we're like taking the current time and trying to like subtract it from the time that it was last purchased, I believe, to like come up with how many days it's been since that item was like last purchased. And if there is nothing in there, then we're putting NA like in this one, I believe. I don't think any of these have not been purchased also. Then in the return, yeah, we essentially have like this icon button imported from Chakra to essentially give us like this back arrow, and then using some of the styling that we have in our smart list theme to like make it look this way. And then just an unordered list of like the different kind of elements that we want to show on screen.
And
then,
yeah, because sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say we're using the find, so we get the actual just like the object return from context, and so then we can, when we're then displaying the list items, it's just we're just doing the like the key value pairs, and that's how we're getting that.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's pretty much the majority of our issue. We kind of like met a couple times this week to like go through some wireframes we created. So, I mean, I think we have a pretty good handle on like these next few issues in terms of like directionally where we want to go styling. But yeah, it's really exciting to see that the bulk of the functionality has been completed.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Rebecca, you feel like you understand the code that they wrote this week? Is that true? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Rebecca.
Can you go back to the view list where you're rendering the link?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Link to items. So when you pass it, you change the component for the detail items to have props in the private route, right? Is that in router? Sorry.
It is. Could you repeat your question? You're asking if we pass props to this item detail component?
Yeah, because I noticed that in the private route you added the props, and that's so that you could get the
yeah. So
brand, right?
Yeah, to what Rachel was saying, we used kind of like that resource article that you had sent on private and public routes, because we were initially trying to pass props like here on line 24, but it like wasn't, I think because of the way we have certain things nested, it like wasn't actually giving us access to what we needed. So we saw this syntax of like kind of trying to pass the props in here or include, I guess, all of the props that, you know, are passed down through browser router. So it's like really this private route section is like where the props passing is happening.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because both of us had experience using like the slug and accessing the params, but not in, it was like not when we had, neither of us had used private and public routes before, and we were just trying to figure out how to get it. So it took us a little while to get the rendering, but once we got that article that you gave us that Indira had given us a few weeks back and just like read through that and put in the code, it just all worked. So we were like, oh, okay.
Magic.
Cool though. Yeah, it's cool to see like different ways of kind of like achieving the same ends, like trying to access the params, but in a way that uses different syntax, I think is always like interesting and a new like learning opportunity. So
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when we switched everything over from the logic we were using before to the private and public routes that Indira had suggested, it definitely cleaned things up and eliminated a lot of redundancy.
Cool. Nice. Indira or Ali, any other comments or questions?
I actually just want to add one thing. What we did is, then they're going to talk about it. Rebecca and Audra are starting like a theme. If you want to maybe show the theme, Shane. And so we added in that theme as well for ours. So we're all creating a theme. So our buttons are in line with the design that they're doing, and it's also in line with how we want to move forward based on the wireframe we've created. So we're trying to incorporate that too.
Yeah, that's kind of also what I was going to say. I really like how you styled the buttons to match their design, because like, I think when I first saw it, when I was reviewing it, they didn't look like buttons. And I was like,
they didn't. Because we hadn't changed it. We put Chakra Provider over our whole app, and then it changed some rendering, and we hadn't gone back in and specifically changed the components. And so you're right. We were like, yeah, let's make it look like buttons.
So yeah, I really like that.
yeah. And to that point, like what will happen in the coming weeks is that like, it's really cool with Chakra and a lot of styling libraries. You can just kind of like create these different classes to apply to like the different type of styling elements you have. And I think we did a pretty good job of like coming up with like what those styling elements would be. So like the buttons that are going to be like kind of on click buttons, we already have a class for those, but then the buttons that would be more like your detail and delete, like we'll create a separate class for those like in this coming week. And it'll be like a lot easier to apply styles consistently without using a ton of like inline styling.
Yeah, we talked a lot about styling at office hours. And I'm really excited to see what all they come up with, because I also have not used Chakra UI, but I'm excited that they are using it. That you guys are using it because it focuses on accessibility sort of at a high level. So this is going to be
That's great.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Who did-
exactly why we decided to choose it. Because Rebecca, you said you'd heard that podcast about it, right?
Yeah, probably a couple months ago, I was at a podcast and they mentioned it, and they were just speaking pretty highly of how accessible it was right out of the box, and that it was built to be easily extensible, but mostly accessible as well.
Nice. Who did the work in Adobe XD?
Shane did it all.
You know, wireframe, but we all like collaborated on like our colors and like the
Uh-huh.
things are kind of gonna change based on like what we all want.
Nice. That's cool to see that. Just the intention, kind of planning that out.
Yeah, it definitely made our issue a lot easier. So
Mhm.
thanks, Shane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks
right
for
on.
letting me do it. I really appreciated it. And
I
Shane,
think
fine.
that yeah, I think they look really nice. What I would try to reconsider are more like the colors,
Mhm.
because you have green as something that you need soon. And I would think like if I need something soon, it's more towards the red than the green. The green is I'm good on this item. So like just try to look at like how some libraries use colors like for different things, and try to pick something that like might be more intuitive. Like if I see green, I mean like I'm good with my rice. I don't need any more rice. So yeah.
No, that's definitely a good point. Maybe we'll reverse the color order of the
user feedback straight from the source. We love
That's
it.
right. Cool. All right. Rebecca, you want to show
Yeah, sure. Let's see.
what you and Audra worked on?
All right. Can you guys see my screen over here? I can see yourself.
Yes, we can now. Yep.
Go away. You guys are right in my way and I can't
Yeah.
Come on. There you go. All right. So as a user, I want the welcome screen to look pretty so that the app looks professional and welcoming. The AC was the welcome screen. The screen that the user sees before they've created their list looks something like the following or equivalent using our creativity. So yeah, I just wanted to again mention Shane, give a shout out to him. This wireframe was super easy for us to kind of follow and let us add little comments in. It just, I think, streamlined us being able to collaborate remotely. So thanks again for taking the time on top of your other issue to do this. So yeah, based on this wireframe that Shane put out, we've made a couple tweaks just in our back and forth through the week, but we have styled it a little bit similarly. So we have kind of the bones in place to start to extend these to all the other pages, but I can kind of show what we did there. Like Shane and Rachel mentioned, we're using Chakra UI, so we've imported that as a dependency. And then Chakra works with, it comes with a default theme that's extensible. And so what we're doing is we've created a style folder here with a theme file in it that's extending the base theme that's in there. We've started to add brand colors. So these are basically a variable that we can access through all of the components via this brand token. So that if we decide we want to change the color, we can change it here and it's changing it throughout the app.
Rebecca, can I ask what's the sort of semantic meaning with those numbers on the brand, like for each property?
That's a good question. So the way that Chakra is defaulted to, they have basically it's different values within the same color range. So if we go to default theme, so red 50 is a lighter variant of this red, 100, 200, so that they get darker as the values go up. So it's just kind of a
okay.
common
Convention
token
or something.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think like Material UI and some other styling libraries do a similar thing as well.
Yeah. So we stuck with that pattern and just added our brand color to that. we kind of streamlined it a little bit. There's just a couple color variants. If we needed it now, we could, add to that. So font weight, overall text styles. We've just kind of started expanding upon the current library and tweaking it to match what Shane had in that wireframe. To your point about buttons, so in Chakra, there's a standard button component that we've restyled here, but then they have variants within those components. So the button that we're using in the wireframe is a solid variant. Let me go back here. So it's solidly filled in. There are also outline variants and lightened variants. So I think what we can do is just try to match what you guys have in your detail list is we can create new variants as we move forward so that they're all working off of the same base style, but they're styled slightly differently depending on the background or the use. So then if I jump into our app, we've wrapped everything in the Chakra provider. So, and then that passes to it this theme, the smart list theme that we're importing from that other file. So the smart list theme is extending the base theme. We're making edits to it, importing it into app.js, and then passing it to the provider, which is providing it throughout the app. So we've begun converting some of the items that we had as divs into boxes, which are Chakra's base component. So the way that the box works is it renders a div unless you tell it otherwise. So you can kind of cast it to another type with this as tag. So in this case, we're using the Chakra heading. The default rendering output of the heading is an H2. So because we wanted it to be an H1, we have to cast it as an H1. So if you wanted to do H1 through 4, what you would always use this heading tag, but you would cast it to whichever one you wanted, unless you wanted the default H2. So similar to the box, in most cases we have it as a div, so we're not casting it to anything else, but in this case we wanted it as a span, so we can just cast it to that. And then you can pass all these token components that were from that style or properties from that style. So font weight, bold, normal, to try to get some of those variations. And then the same in this welcome component that we didn't need to re-import the theme because it's wrapped within the provider. So it's already passed to this component. But we've converted these to, in this case, you can see the box, replace the div. It's still a div, so we didn't need to cast it. We're setting the background of this div to the brand color. So you can start to see where we're using those things throughout and can update it as we go. So text is a common replacement for many text items, paragraphs. You can also use it for an H tag, but I think it makes more sense to keep it as headings. And then form components and inputs. And so some of these input components and the form components are really what's doing the heavy lifting as far as making sure that items are accessible and keyboard navigable. So we've tried to use as many of these items as we can throughout.
Rebecca, I saw my attribute. What my equals 3%? What does that do?
Oh, that's a margin Y. So it creates a margin.
Oh.
Right, so there's an MX and an MY, and
Okay.
add top and bottom margins. MY is adding left and right. So there's the they're tokens that are created within the documentation. And I think,
Okay.
Yeah, so we've incorporated the error messaging as well within their components to kind of update what we had before, but push it into the Chakra world.
Mm-hmm.
That error messaging looks so good.
Mm-hmm.
Audra did a real good job.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Audra couldn't be here. You may have mentioned this already because she is mentoring today. So all the good luck for her.
Yeah, very cool. Nice. This looks great.
Yeah, it's coming together. I think it was great that we were all able to meet this week and kind of make a plan for moving forward and at least share both sides so that you know, the other team, Shane and Rachel, are already looking at Chakra and kind of wrapping their head around it so we can just start running with it next week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very cool. Good job. Love it. So everyone's clear on sort of how Chakra works. Like, so Shane and Rachel, you're feeling okay about how to use it in these coming issues?
Yeah, I think when we first met, they kind of like went through the like base syntax and like functionality of what we were actually doing. And then Rachel and I also like incorporated some of it into like our issue at the end of this week when we were done, just to like make sure the buttons and stuff like were in sync, at least for demos today. So I think we like got a good explanation from the other team and also like a little bit of application on our own as well. So it's pretty cool.
Perfect. Great. Cool. Good work. I'm excited to see what happens in the coming week.
And I just wanted to tell Shane, thank you again for the wireframe.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, that makes it so clear. It's such a good, like, keeps everybody kind of in sync on the same page about where you're going with the design. So awesome. Good cat. All right. Well, so we have a learning module this week. Allie's gonna talk to us about accessibility. So take it away.
I'm going to talk to you about accessibility.
Oh, good. I'm not wrong.
As soon as I figure out where everything is. Okay. All right. Can you see?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Whoa.
hit present. We're seeing the slides not in presentation mode.
What?
We're just seeing the slides not in presentation mode.
Oh,
That's what you intended, or not.
Hold on. We'll get this.
Yeah.
No, we'll just share the whole thing. Okay.
Cool.
Now, do we have the slides?
Yep. Perfect.
All right, accessibility, what, why, and how. First of all, I want to say you've all already been doing a great job of sort of keeping accessibility in the back of your minds as we've gone through this. Like I said, with choosing Chakra UI, I thought was a great decision, what with accessibility. So what is Ally? I am grateful that the Ally abbreviation exists. I don't know about the rest of you, but typing accessibility is nearly impossible for me to get right the first time. What with 11 letters and multiple C's and S's. But yeah, so the hashtag A11Y is a shortened version of the word accessibility, which has 11 letters. Try Rachel's face. Yeah. And it's a lot easier for me to type. It's, it's already an accessibility hack by itself. So, so what is accessibility? From Wikipedia, web accessibility is the inclusive practice of ensuring that there are no barriers, none, that prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. When sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally all users have equal access to information and functionality. I'm a really big fan of this description, especially because it mentions socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth. I think we're all sort of used to, or we hear a lot about physical disabilities in regard to this. We don't hear quite so much about situational disabilities, and as far as I'm concerned, nearly enough about access to people with lack of bandwidth. For example, my grandmother and a significant portion of my family can still basically only get dial-up. So I have a tendency to think with them in mind when I build. The W3C maintains a working group dedicated to web accessibility, and they publish related standards. In addition to that, in the US, Section 508 requires government agencies to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. Andrew, is Section 508 what they use to sue Domino's?
It is.
Okay, I'm going to mention that in a minute. Yeah.
So even though it was originally designed to make it so that government websites were accessible, it's starting to be the courts are starting to find that it applies to private businesses as well.
Yeah. Okay. Some people with disabilities access websites using assistive technologies. They include screen readers, screen magnifiers, speech inputs, assistive keyboards, and braille displays. Popular screen readers include, is this pronounced NVIDIA? NVDA?
I always say NVDA. I don't know.
NVDA,
Yeah.
Anyway, and JAWS, and then VoiceOver, which is built into Mac. If I regularly use VoiceOver on my Mac, especially. I mean, I use it anyway, but my eyes get tired a lot. But I also, I'll use it to test websites, and boy, is it an adventure sometimes. I highly suggest that you try using a screen reader to just sort of navigate your average app. It's your website. It's interesting, for lack of a better word.
When Shane and I were doing our ARIA tag issue, we were like, oh, let's put in a screen reader and let's see how we do. It was a hot mess, one. And two, it was so stressful for this thing to be just like having a stroke kind of as it was trying to like jump through our non-formatted code. It was,
I was about to literally say the exact same thing, Rebecca. It was very eye-opening, I would say, for sure. Just seeing how, like, I guess if that really was your only way to access websites, like it really is like a barrier.
So that's why this is so important. So why? Why do we want our websites to be accessible? I mean, we've talked about some of it. For me, mostly it's the right thing to do. I mean, personally, I want everybody to be able to access my websites just because. But two, you might be legally obligated to make your website accessible. And the laws are sort of changing all over the world all the time. So that's a thing to keep an eye on. More people in the US access websites with assistive technology than live in Canada. I'm kind of sad that Audra's not here for that line, but some estimates put that 20% of website visitors have some sort of disability, which is a lot of people you don't want to prevent from accessing your websites. And four, making your pages more accessible for people with disabilities makes them more accessible for everyone. Not all disabilities, well, here, I'm getting ahead of myself, hold on. Let's see. There are a lot of different types of people who need to use our websites in a lot of different types of ways. So we're going to talk about the persona spectrum. Use the persona spectrum to understand related mismatches and motivations across the spectrum of permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. It's a quick tool to help foster empathy and to show how a solution scales to a broader audience. This just gives an idea of, for example, you fix your website so it's easier to, or your technology in general, I suppose. So it's easier to use for someone with a permanent disability who only has one arm. Also makes it easier for someone with a broken arm or someone holding onto a small child and trying to navigate the internet with one hand, which I've watched my sister do so many times lately, and it's just funny. But that, well, sorry, where did we go? Okay. But that applies, to visual, to auditory, to speaking, anything we can use or do to make our websites more accessible to one person is going to make it more accessible, most likely to someone we haven't thought of.
Along those lines, like I recently read this book. It's called like Building for Everyone, and it's like about product inclusion kind of thing. And one of the cases that I found the most interesting was one about how they were doing like the Google Voice thing, like the Nest, is it called? Mm-hmm. And like they started testing it with like Spanish speaking, and they're like, this doesn't work, you know? And then they're like, but by enhancing it for people with from Spanish countries, they also made it better for everyone who is not a native English speaker, you know? So like, you never know how much impact a single change does, like to make it even more like inclusive. And also how hard it was for like the Zoom backgrounds, how they didn't work with people with darker skin. Because it had only been tested initially for like white people, basically.
Yep.
But yeah.
What was the name of that book?
It's called Building for Everyone. I can send a link to our Slack channel
Okay,
after
cool.
this.
Awesome. Thank you,
Yeah.
Indiana.
Yeah, I was reading an article recently that was kind of talking about the different types of folks that you might be developing for with disabilities, and we often think of the physical disabilities, but it was talking about how many people, even in the United States alone, are functionally illiterate. I think it's something like 20%. It's a high number. And that a lot of those folks you don't consider as needing a screen reader, but it's a large volume of people who need that help.
Yeah. Good call.
And also it's the whole like debate about spaces versus tabs. And I saw like a post on like someone that said like tabs should be the answer for accessibility reasons, mainly because he had like 2 co-workers who were software developers, but they needed different things for reading their code. So they needed to set up their tabs as something specific for it to be readable for them. So like in terms of accessibility, try to go with tabs if you have the option.
Good. Now I know a good answer to that argument. Okay. And on to how. Simple best practices. I like this quote. I'm a fan of this quote. The best ARIA is no ARIA at all. We need to use semantic HTML whenever possible. It's using valid semantic HTML is always going to make our lives easier. 2, always include alt attributes on your image tags. Otherwise, and more specifically, descriptive alt attributes on your image tags. The description image is generally not helpful. In fact, I think most of my linters won't let me put image or picture or anything else of that variety in an alt tag or an alt attribute in my image tag. Use
I'll add to that sometimes the right alt text for an image is just an empty string as well. So if there are images that are just decorative, but they don't actually convey useful content, you want to hide that from the screen reader so it doesn't sort of clutter up the experience.
Yeah. Thank you. Use ARIA attributes if necessary. Ensure all content is reachable via keyboard. I follow a lot of accessibility folks on Twitter, and the number of times I see them sort of yelling into the ether about not being able to access a thing on a web page because you just can't get to it with it. Like there's just no way to get to it with a keyboard. So, which is also annoying to me because when this hand bothers me, I have trouble with my mouse, and if I can't tab into it, I don't have to use my hand. Anyway, ensure all content and tab ordering makes sense. That's another fun one. You're tabbing through a website, you're in the middle of reading something, and next thing you know, you're at the top of the page or the bottom, because the tab will have taken you somewhere, who knows. Use sufficient color contrast. Make sure people can, distinguish your text from your background. There are specific numbers and guidelines for that, and I'll show you a couple of those in a minute. And don't use only color to signify state. Not everybody can see color. Screen readers don't read color, among other things. Any questions, other comments?
I think that's where it's nice to lean on a framework because they've done all the, especially like one like Chakra, where they've done all the work to make sure that all the color contrasts work and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So identify ally issues for remediation. Automated tools such as Axe. I actually use the, it's not React Axe these days. It's core Axe with the React package. But anyway, I use it in, I'll show you here in a minute. I use it in my React projects. And it just console logs out some of the easier to fix issues. Easier to catch, easier to fix. Guided audits, such as what's built into accessibility insights, and then audits by accessibility testing companies such as Fable Tech Labs. Automated testing is a great start, but you will never get 100% of the way there with automated testing. It's just a thing. You have to have physical users testing your products, because you will not catch everything.
Well, and even some of the things that the automated test can find. So an automated test can tell you that you don't have an alt attribute, but it can't tell you what the alt attribute should say, right? So the tools can only do so much, no matter how good they get.
Demos. All right. So real quick, I did want to mention, Andrew and I mentioned briefly the Domino's case. A blind man successfully sued Domino's because he could not order pizza through their website. So a good answer to why should I make my website accessible? Well, because you just might get sued. I'd much rather people, upgrade their websites because it's the right thing to do. But I mean, if they have to be threatened with the law, oh well.
The thing that made me mad about this lawsuit was that they estimated that it was going to cost Domino's something like $20,000 to make the site accessible, and they probably spent $200,000 on legal fees. You know what I mean? Like, what's even the point?
It was so silly.
Right.
Anyway. Can you see the Domino's website on my screen?
Yep.
And probably also my Stardew Valley stuff. Hold on. So I actually, in Firefox has an accessibility tab down here, and I was just curious. I ran it on the Domino's website, and think this is the list of all the issues it still found, which sort of amused me. Most of them are contrast issues. I mean, if you click here, it'll it doesn't meet the AAA guidelines. But so this is I use this tab to catch some of my simpler fixes. I also use the Axe Core React package. New things I'll show you. I put together a real basic example if I can find it. Or not. At any rate, it runs as your project is running. This will start. My computer's been struggling lately with Zoom and VS Code for some reason. Okay, well, oh, there we go. Maybe. All right, so there is in fact a website here. There is some text. It's impossible to see. But if you look at my console, it will tell me that I have one serious issue. My elements have to have sufficient color contrast. Cool. If I go over here, and now we're down to 2 issues. So I just really like this. It's the little things. I regularly forget to make sure there's a level 1 heading on certain pages. Little things. So, and it is used, it gets installed and then runs in production. It sets a delay before it runs, but and then spits out a bunch of console logs. So I'm a big fan of that.
It's in development. It says if the environment is not production.
Thank you. If it's not production, what I meant. Thanks, Indira. So that's one of those things I like to use. Accessibility Insights is fun. I've used it less. I know it's a favorite of Stacy's. But you can, mostly because I use Firefox, but you can add it to Chrome and Microfox to use. Oh, and then this is just an example of a website with basically no issues. Which is not surprising because this is the company that makes the Axe tools. Is there anything else? Andrew, were there any fun examples, or Indira, that you wanted to share? Anything I missed?
I just always like analyzing the Domino's site for accessibility because there's like turds about it in the lawsuit.
It's way too much fun.
And actually, yeah, all the color contrast stuff on this page is mostly legalese at the bottom.
Yeah.
But if you go into their ordering flow, there are some kind of issues that come up with that that accessibility insights or other tools can find. But yeah, their site's a lot more accessible than it was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of this is yelling at this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the biggest thing. So when I let's see, at Zapier, we built a little website about 1.5 years ago, and we had Fable Tech Labs come in and do some manual accessibility testing for it. And there was a whole element there. You had these little kind of like these four little panels that you could click on the arrow and it would open up and show you more info and stuff. And the tester, he could see that there were 4 things. He couldn't get into them at all. He was like, I tried to space and doing all these different things, and like I can't see that content at all. So it really kind of drove home of using the actual semantic tag. So we switched it from this custom implementation to using a details tag under the hood, and then he was able to get to it. And then the other thing is just keyboard access, the ability to use the keyboard to get to all the elements on the page. Because he was like, if I can't get to it by a keyboard, I literally can't. It won't show up for me, So I think if you do those 2 things, like you get a really long way. But it's one of those things where you can't, like, it takes a lot to make a website fully accessible. It's actually pretty hard, but anything you do towards that end is better than not doing it. It's like, and sometimes, in a real world, in a product company or something, it's going to be a process over months and years to actually improve accessibility. I know at Zapier, like there are whole things like in our core product that you can't do if you're on a screen reader, and we know that that's the case. It's really complicated. It's expensive to fix it because we didn't take it into account when we first built it and stuff. So, sometimes that's the reality of it. But hopefully, all of you already are thinking in those terms. So when you get into companies, you can just advocate for it a little bit and try to make whatever you're working on a little bit better.
Yeah, the other thing is like some companies actually have departments in charge of that.
Mhm.
Like, so for example, Visa has a whole department in charge of like accessibility and establishing the guidelines and making sure that we follow those guidelines. And then they have like a library, like an internal library for Visa that has to match that. So like as developers, we don't need to be thinking as much about it. But as a company, like there's someone whose job is basically make
Mhm.
sure that everything is accessible and we follow all the rules.
Yeah, that's great.
So
I do like the advice of you all should fire up screen readers and try that out. It's no substitute for someone who, like this accessibility tester who tested our stuff, who's been using screen readers for 20 years, has seen thousands and thousands of different web pages and how they do things, and has all of all his shortcuts and all these kinds of things, understands the tool super well. Like all those things mean that like it's like you are going to be in there and just it's going to build empathy for that experience, but it's not really going to simulate that experience, right? So just realize sort of the limitations of that. But I would definitely recommend getting in and just trying it out a little bit. Watching him demo with his, or just kind of walk through our page with his screen reader, I was completely disoriented because he was going so fast. It'd say link and he'd just be on to the next thing. I'm like, it's just like super fast. It's like tabbing through, because he knows enough about like, that's a landmark for navigation. I'm not interested in navigation. So he'd be like, as soon as he heard like the first syllable, he's like on to the next thing. It's really fascinating.
yeah, I was amazed by the first thing about like the one arm and accessibility and stuff like that. My husband actually only has one arm, but he never complains about anything like that. I'm like, his limitations are like somewhere else. They're not in using a computer or doing anything like that. Like he's also a software developer, and like he's like everything works fine.
Yeah.
I had a friend in college who was in a coma and lost the use of one half of his body. So he only has access to use with one arm. And one thing I never had thought about until he mentioned it was, who decided that Control-Alt-Delete was the restart thing? He was like, these buttons are on opposite sides of the keyboard. I can't reach them. So he was like trying to hold a pencil in his mouth while he's using his hand on the other side. He's like, this is awful.
Yeah. Actually, most of those keys you can't reconfigure to do anything else. Like you can't reconfigure like what combinations of things do. So like it's more about knowing what things are available to you than yes. But yeah. Okay. Can you guys see my screen with the issues?
Yeah, I see the pairings for this coming week.
Yeah. Okay. So this week we have Audra and Shane and Rachel and Rebecca. This week we actually have 3 issues, and I believe the way it works is we assign the first 2, and whoever finishes first, that's the last one, or you can collaborate on it. So they're all gonna be styling. You guys had a great start. You have all like the mockups for them basically. And the first issue is, as the user, I want the shopping list screen to look pretty so the app looks professional and welcoming. And then the acceptance criteria is that the shopping list screen, the screen that lists all the user's purchases, looks something like the following or equivalent. Use your creativity. Second issue is, as a user, I want the item detail screen to look pretty so the app looks professional and welcoming. And the acceptance criteria is that the item detail screen, the screen a user sees when they tap on one of their items in the shopping list, looks something like the following or equivalent. The last one is, as a user, I want the add an item screen to look pretty so the app looks professional and welcoming. And the acceptance criteria is for the add an item screen, the screen the user uses to add a new item to the list looks something like the following or equivalent. Use your creativity. So yeah, who wants to pick either of the issues?
Or how do you want to approach it? I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense for each pair to take a screen, but maybe someone's going to do the navigation and someone's going to do headers, or yeah, this week I feel like you could maybe self-organize in some other a little bit different way if you want to.
Yeah, I think like from that perspective, the one thing we may need to like meet on earlier in the week, similar to like what we did this week, is just like where our navigation is going to end up. Because I know that like right now we have it as links at the bottom, but in some of the icons at the top. So I think if we like knock that out early and like put it where it needs to be, like we can kind of like work through the two screens if that works for everyone, and then like come together on that last one.
Yeah, we can also meet with Audra like either later today or this morning and see because I'm open to whatever. I'm open to it, pairs, issue prepare, whatever pair finishes first does the next issue, or I'm open to like dividing it by person, like however works best for everyone. I'm very flexible.
Yeah, other teams in the past have just mob programmed the whole thing too, which can be kind of fun, but yeah, whatever kind of works for you.
Rebecca, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for whatever. In some ways it might be easier to just divide and conquer. I mean, I think it makes sense. Like Shane was saying, that navigation is kind of the biggest unknown of moving those tabs up into that header. But it doesn't matter to me. Whatever, I'll take whatever issues we want to.
Or what you might want to consider is like one pair takes the navigation part, and then the other pair takes two of the styling of the actual pages. Right? I don't know.
That could work. Why don't we do like, I'm down with doing the, like for the sake of allocating right now, like doing the list view. If the other team wants to like spearhead the navigation and that other like the item detail one together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like the add item form might take it's like maybe probably more scope than the item details. But yeah, I think you're like, I mean, you have a good framework to work with and stuff, so hopefully it all kind of comes together.
So this one's gonna be Audra and Shane. And I'm going to do
Nice.
okay.
Cool. Nice. Great.
So what are we gonna do for office hours this week?
Who's supposed to do it?
It's Eddie, right?
No, I think we had Stacy.
Oh,
Stacy's
really?
not even.
I can do it.
Oh.
Yeah. What day would work for people? We want to. I mean, so for the Americans, we have Thanksgiving on Thursday. So, do we want to try to do office hours on like Tuesday or something? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, like Tuesday or Wednesday is good for me.
Yeah, either way. Okay.
We usually do it at 8 to 9 EST, 5 to 6 PST.
Oh, okay, PM. All right, that's cool. On Wednesday. Okay, yeah, I can put a calendar invite out for that.
Does Wednesday work for everyone, or would we prefer Tuesday?
Wednesday works for me.
Wednesday's good for me.
Okay, cool. We'll keep that. All right, perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm excited to see the app come together with the design and everything. Yeah, be fun. All right, have a great week, everybody. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, everyone.
All right.
Bye.